Hi everyone, welcome back to Career Journeys, brought to you by Career Companion. We're here with Christie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Could you give everyone an overview of your job title and where you work and what they do?
Yeah, of course. My name's Christy. I am the operations lead at Heidi Health. So, Heidi Health is a medical AI scribing company. So, basically, we create a product that can be used by clinicians, all over the world of any specialty, which takes their notes for them and allows them to create clinical documents with the click of a button. So, really a huge time saver for clinicians. And I look after operations. So, everything that falls under that includes customer onboarding, customer success, and all the operational processes that sit throughout the company.
Amazing. That sounds like a really useful tool. So it just generates it for them rather than them having to sit and just write with what they say is the best handwriting in the world. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So essentially, clinicians just hit start at the start of their consult. Heidi will listen in, generate the notes for them. And the best thing about it is it's designed to be, as we call it, every clinician's AI resident. So each clinician, it's basically trained to take notes and mimic how the clinician would usually speak and type their notes anyway.
Ah, okay, perfect. Sounds very interesting and sounds like it's definitely needed. And so is that global?
It is. So we have just recently expanded internationally, and it is absolutely needed. And you'd be surprised the number of clinicians that discover Heidi for the first time and they just think to themselves, what was I doing all this time without it? So, it's definitely taken off.
Yeah, great. And for people who are listening at home or wherever they are, you sort of glazed over what an operations lead does. Could you give us a bit more of a in-depth overview of what you do in your day-to-day?
Yeah, absolutely. So every day is a little bit different. So I'll do my best to kind of provide some color. But basically, my role involves doing a lot of on the ground work, especially as we're a growing company. A lot of my role is building up the processes to allow us to accommodate our increasing demand, whether that be from new users and new clinics to be onboarded or customer support and success systems. So for example, with all of the users that you get, they'll need training, they'll need ongoing support when they have queries, and when they send in queries, who responds to them, how do we respond to them, how do we create resources that people are able to view, understand, comprehend quite easily. So I sit behind doing that, but also doing a lot of the thinking and the strategic thinking behind that. And then, also working across a large range of projects dedicated to that. I work very closely with our sales team and our product team and the regional leads, so the regional sales leads in the USA and the UK, to get an idea of the demand that we have, what's coming in, where the key problems are in our underlying processes. Being able to correct that and build that and really build, make sure that all leading to this big goal of making sure that our users have a really, really seamless end-to-end experience on Heidi. I lead a team with that. So a big part of my role is, day-to-day leadership, coordinating team members, making sure that I'm always kind of, reassessing all of our priorities to make sure that we're treading north and that everyone's working on the highest priority thing at any given point in time, and that, all the wheels are in motion. So, in short, I think my role is a bit of a combination of problem solving, problem identification, doing that strategic thinking, and also the on the ground work.
Yeah, super interesting. That's, like you said, no day must be the same.
It's so different. It's wild. And that's one of the fun things I think about working
Yeah.
at an early stage, rapidly scaling company where mundane 9 to 5s is just not the way it is. It's so different every day, but I think that's what keeps it fun and challenging.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that seems like a really, like you'd have to be really on top of organization, like,
Totally.
and on top of admin, like a lot.
Definitely. I think I'm lucky in that respect, that I think organization and time management have always been some of my strongest suits. So it's definitely made things easier, but not to mention you have to, constantly iterate your, I guess, internal processes for organization and time management, because things can slip very easily if you're not on top of it and if it's not written down somewhere. So just don't rely on memory for everything.
Yeah, great. And I think it sounds really interesting, the fact that you get to be across so many different facets of the business as well. You'd had to have pretty good stakeholder management to be doing what you're doing.
No, thanks. Yeah, I think stakeholder management is definitely a skill that I've really had to hone in on and be able to develop. And especially as Heidi's grown, as my role has grown and progressed, it's something that you're put in unique situations and challenges every day where you need to manage not only external stakeholders, but internal stakeholders. And that can be across a variety of different things, especially when it comes to, yeah, product decisions and the needs that the product needs and what you believe from an operations perspective. And it's about communicating that prioritization perspective to your product team and your other decision makers. So, yeah.
Amazing. And for yourself as well, how many people were in the business when you joined? Were you an early joiner or halfway through?
Yeah, I think I joined, so I joined Heidi in May of 2023. So I was probably halfway through. I can't even remember what number of employee I was, but we've definitely, it feels like we've doubled in employee size since then. So yeah, probably about halfway through.
Cool. It's always, I've worked for a startup myself. It's always fun getting to be part of, I guess, a really growing organization. But like you touched on earlier, very important that it's probably not going to be your standard 9 to 5 hours.
Yeah, look, definitely not. And I think there's always that boundary, and I think everyone around you will always promote work-life balance, which is so important. But at the same time, I mean, to be honest with you, what we're doing now is, especially with international expansion, I'm currently hiring in my team. So I have 4 or 5 roles open right now with candidates in the UK and in the US. So I'm having to do lots of around the clock interviews, just anything to make it work. So yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. And we'll pick your brain on that later as well in the interview insight section. That's going to be really interesting to get your take on how people interview in the US and the UK compared to Australian candidates. And let's now rewind, and I'll ask the question that I love to ask. What did you want to do when you were in high school?
Yeah, great question. So I think when I was in high school, I wasn't entirely sure of what I wanted to do, to be completely transparent. Growing up, and especially in my later years of high school, I was always a STEM kid, really loved science, really loved maths. English and humanities subjects were never my forte. I think I always naturally gravitated to those, I think, logical subjects where there's always a right and wrong answer, which I really liked. And yeah, casting my mind back, I think in that period, I was really into health as well. And I thought potentially medicine was on the cards. But yeah, at that point in my life, I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And then when you got out of high school, did you go to university? Did you go straight into work? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I started, when I finished year 12, I then started a Bachelor of Science at Melbourne Uni. So, and the reason why I picked that course was just because I knew that that was going to be a good stepping stone for whatever postgraduate course I wanted to do after. So, for example, if that idea of doing medicine was still on the cards, I would have that option, presuming I got the marks and all and I worked hard enough. But then it also allowed for different pathways that may have presented themselves for me to go pursue that as well.
Okay, great. And so you're at uni. Have you sort of got an idea of where you're wanting to go career-wise? Is it completely different to where you are now of what you were thinking back then?
100%. I think where I am now, if you had asked me 3-4 years ago what I would be, if I would be doing this now, I would have said absolutely not, and I probably would have laughed in your face, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
I didn't actually know what exactly I wanted to do, even in my first sort of 6 months of science, and it wasn't until about a year into my science degree did I start to delve into what I'm doing now. So yeah, no, I actually had no idea.
Okay, cool. Don't worry, I was the same. I left school, went to TAFE, did multimedia, refined it down to photography. Then I studied a bit of photography, and then I went into full-time photography, did that for 5 years, and then I transitioned into sales. So I completely understand where you're coming from. But you said in that it was about a year in that you started to delve into what you're sort of doing now.
Yeah.
what did that look like? Was that a extracurricular sort of course, or was it work experience?
Yeah, for sure. So it was more so work experience. So to give a bit of an outline of the process of that all transpiring, really. Yeah, about a year into my science degree. So I had been, when I started my science degree, I was working a couple of side jobs. So I was doing admin at a relative's cake business. And then I was also a maths tutor. Following on from my love of STEM, I thought only natural I start off my first job being a maths tutor.
And working at a cake shop, I'd be triple the size right now if I was working at a cake shop.
Yeah, I will say, Sam, the offcuts and the chocolate sweet treats at every shift were one of the perks. But
Yeah,
yeah,
amazing.
so I was a maths tutor, and again, about a year into my course, I was approached by an EdTech company who were also starting out, and they were looking for maths tutors. So naturally, I thought, sure, why not have a little bit of extra time? So I had a couple of conversations with them, and before I knew it, and before I'd even started tutoring, they had said to me, "Hey, we're looking for what they called an operations manager." Again, early stage startup, and I thought, okay, I have no idea what this is. I have no idea what it entails, but why not? Sounds interesting. Let's just give it a crack. So yeah, started doing that, and that started off kind of doing the administrative tasks of the company, and then as the company grew, I then led one of the internal teams, and then was promoted to head of operations there. So I looked after sales, ops, customer success, and that was until early 2000. And I think then I was realizing that I really loved tech, and I loved startups, and I loved operations, and just being able to get such wide exposure to different functions that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to acquire. So, but I think there was this always underlying interest in health. So that led me to Heidi. So yeah, earlier in 2023, I found a role popped up on my LinkedIn feed at Heidi for a clinic operations associate, which I applied for, and then and then I managed to score that role, and then it's been just working my way up from there, and I was recently promoted in a couple of months ago. So
Congratulations.
yeah,
That's
thank
awesome.
you, thank you.
Okay, so that's super interesting. So just want to touch on a couple of things there. You mentioned that you got approached when you were first tutoring. Was that through a networking or LinkedIn, or how did that come about?
Yeah, so that was via LinkedIn. So I think, the algorithm must have done what the algorithm does best. And I think it was a case scenario of the founders or the employees of that company just doing a bit of a search for maths tutors at Melbourne Uni, and I must have been what popped up in their search results. So all it was just a simple cold message to see if I was interested in becoming a tutor. But I think, even looking before that, it was always instilled in me to keep a LinkedIn profile up to date, even if there was nothing much to add to it, whether I was doing a little bit of work experience or in uni, just anything I could add to that, I should. So luckily for me, I had a LinkedIn profile up and running, and had the fact that I was a tutor there. So I guess that's how I was somehow found.
No, that's amazing, and it's great advice. Always have your LinkedIn up to date. Like you said, even if it's a tiny couple of things that you need to add in, it's going to be worth it. Because I assume at the time you weren't looking for that kind of opportunity. Is that right?
Not at all. Not at all. It was something that fell into my lap by pure serendipity. And that, I think, was the catalyst for where I am now. So it's crazy how things happened.
Yeah, and you were there for a bit, and then they just approached you for that promotion into more of that operational role. Was it a
Yeah.
hard decision for you to make, or were you just like, oh, cool, let's do it?
Yeah, definitely. So I think back at that EdTech company, the company was progressing very quickly. And naturally, as that happened, because I was one of the early employees and the first operations / customer support / sales team member, I was able to take a lead early on in that. And I think there came to a crossroads where I was working more and more hours, and I was practically working full-time whilst also trying to study full-time. And that became quite a challenge to navigate. And I even look back on that now. I remember doing some very, very long days, and I realized that it's really hard to have your cake and eat it too. So I really just had to lean in on one thing. And I think when the time came for promotion, I think that was something I embraced with open arms. I took it as a sign of, okay, yeah, cool. I'm being entrusted with this. There is some belief in what I can do. And I wanted to really lean into that and absorb as much and learn as much as I possibly could and gain as much real world industry experience and exposure as I could at the time.
Yeah, great. And so did you end up finishing your degree as well, or did you have to make a decision between the two?
Yeah, so what I had done is I didn't want to, I was already, about a third into my degree at this point. I didn't want to just drop the degree. I had started and I wanted to finish that. So I ended up dropping that to part-time. So just doing 1 or 2 subjects a semester. And yeah, I'm just kind of finishing that off passively in the background even now as well.
Oh, that seems like a very logical and analytical, by the sounds of, like you said, there was a pretty clear-cut decision. So, and have you found it challenging, I guess, still studying at the same time as being in what now, your second startup?
Yeah, I think there has been challenges, definitely. But I think it's something that you learn to navigate over time. I mean, for me, my work often involves travel. So I've done a fair bit of domestic travel. I've even done a big international trip. And naturally, that means that you can't be in classes at specific times of day. And especially when you have classes that have an attendance hurdle, it just makes it all that bit harder. So I've really had to, leverage any sort of remote options that have been available to do that. And just be able to study in my downtime, whether it be before hours, after hours, or on the weekends. But I think the load that I'm doing now is manageable, where I still have time to do not work and study related things and to enjoy my social life, but still getting that done passively in the background.
Great. No, that's amazing. And was it that first startup where you went part-time, or was it once you joined Allied Health that you went part-time? With the uni, sorry.
Yeah, with uni. So it was in my first startup that I went part-time. So when I had joined the first startup, it took a few months. I was doing kind of part-time hours for the first 3-4 months, and then things really accelerated. So there was a period of about 3 or 4 months again where I was trying to do it all. I was trying to be a hero about things and do full-time study and full-time work. And the mix of those was just yielding a lot of fatigue and exhaustion. So I think after that, after that 7-8 months had passed, it was time to make a wiser decision around what the next steps would be.
Yeah. And sounds like you definitely made the right decision. I would not have lasted 7 or 8 months. I probably would have cried after about 2 weeks. So hats off to you. With that decision, like, obviously it's a big decision. And the reason I say that is because you were studying science and your degree was science, whereas the role that you were in was, I guess, maths tutoring in a startup, which hasn't got much to do with science. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Was it a hard decision to go, I'm going to put uni on the back burner and pursue this? And the second point to my question is, did you have any discussions with anyone else, or did you just make that decision on your own?
Yeah, great question. So I think for me, going back, it was a decision that I knew was imminent. And ultimately, casting my mind back now, I knew that in my gut, I think that was the right decision to make. And I think there's always a lot of stereotype and stigma around things like this, where especially in my social circle, family, friends, there was this preconceived idea of very specific order to things. You go to school, you finish year 12, you go to uni, you get a job, you build your way up. And because I had, in a sense, switched around that order, there was definitely people that challenged me. And I think when I was looking at, back then, I was looking at my options. I remember thinking to myself, I remember referencing back the velocity of learning and thinking, I look at my velocity of learning in doing a science degree versus I look at the velocity of learning of being in a very fast-paced startup where I'm having the opportunity to learn and try and get my hands dirty in a bunch of different skills and processes and systems each day. That's giving me such unique experience. And I think thinking about those two things made that decision easier for me in the sense that I knew what was going to give me the advantage in the sense of getting the experience, but also having transferable skills, which I know that in a science degree, as good as it is using it as a stepping stone, it was not going to give me the transferable skills I needed to be able to go and get a good job straight out of that degree. There was going to be something that followed that. So yeah, I think I remember having conversations with my parents about it. And I think initially because they had not known and not heard of, they weren't all too familiar with startups at the time. And I'm lucky in the sense that they've always trusted my calls and they've trusted my intuition. And they've always said that they'll back me in whatever decision I make. So whilst they made it clear that they were not all in agreement to it, I think I'm lucky that they trusted my call. But yeah, I think that was the essence of it. So it was just a mix of having to manage expectations with others and be real to myself and follow my gut intuition around what I thought was going to be the best option for me longer term.
Yeah, I love that. And that would have been very hard having such support. Well, it's great that you had such supporting parents of them wanting you to do your very best. But then that also makes it very hard when you're suggesting something that's, I guess, against their best nature and their intuition for you. And the fact that you still go, look, I understand where you're coming from, but I think I've got this planned out due to this and this reason. The fact that you are able to take that leap, like a lot of people would just be like, look, okay, mum and dad are telling me this, I'm going to stick with that. Were you ever close at any point to going, yes, they do make a good point. Maybe I should just do this. And what made you be able to go, I'm going to trust my gut here?
Yeah, totally. So I think even looking back now, I remember my parents having conversations and I would even be questioning myself at times. It's just seeing people around me. I mean, all the people that I went to school with and graduated with who were also in uni, no one was in the position that I was in of also being able to do work while studying. So I think I was navigating some foreign territory of, okay, I have options here, which is good, but I don't know which to take. And I think for me, I always said to myself that I wasn't going to let the thoughts and opinions of others dictate the direction for me. And whilst I will always, listen, I think, and absorb my parents' opinions and other people's opinions, and I think this was a topic where with every person you'd speak to, you'd get a different opinion. I spoke to many other people that I work with, other friends, family, who said, oh, you're in a startup, go lean into it, drop uni. And I think what I realized is, every single person that you speak to 10 people, you'll get 10 different opinions. And really, I just needed to go with what I thought was best for me. And I think the proof was in the pudding, really. And just remembering that gut intuition and what I knew deep down was internally best for me was that I was in a very privileged and unique position of being able to get experience so early on in my career that if I were to say, because I knew that if I didn't go full time in that and lean into that, that was going to hinder the opportunities that I'd get in the future. Because I think that, not to deviate, but I think with startups, if you are not a full-time worker and you only work 10, 15 hours a week, you will be a task doer. You'll just be given the set of tasks. But if you want to go and own things and you want to go and build up your experience and take ownership of different things and eventually lead, you need to be more invested and committed than that. So I think just knowing that and knowing that was going to be the future direction did help my decision making there.
Yeah, great. And I think it's fantastic that you know, because a lot of us, I think when we're younger, we just, we're fortunate enough to have both our parents see them as gospel, and we go out and we get that one opinion from them and we're like, okay, that's enough research basically for me. And then I'll pit it against what I'm thinking. But I love that you went out to, at least 10 different people. As you said, everyone's going to have different opinions. And you were able to take, I guess, the good and the bad from all of them and then make a collective decision, and it sounds like, well, not it sounds like, it's obviously worked out really well, which is great. And you were then there for what, a year and a half,
Yeah, about a
roughly?
year and a half. Yeah.
And were you looking for a new role, or was it just as you were scrolling through LinkedIn that this role popped up? Where were you at in your career at this point?
Yeah, so at this point in my career, I was very much enjoying and fulfilled in what I was doing. I was, yeah, recently promoted to head of operations there and really just figuring things out. The company was growing. I was still presented with new challenges every day. So it was definitely not a means of me feeling bored or unengaged. It really was just a moment of me being on LinkedIn one day, and I think in my feed or in my For You suggestions, this had popped up. So it naturally piqued my interest. It caught my eye, and I remember a night very clearly. I was just scrolling on my computer at 8 p.m. in the evening, and I saw that role, and I clicked on it, and there was this instant feeling of this feels like it's for me. So yeah, I wasn't really on the job market at that point in time, but I saw it. It was there. Had a crack at it, and yeah, was luckily enough to get the job in the end.
Yeah, great. And that, I guess that comes back to, like you said, the importance of having your LinkedIn up to date. If you hadn't had it up to date, it wouldn't have been, because the way LinkedIn works is it will go off your actual job title or the skills feed that you put out or the keywords, and then it will make suggestions based off that.
Yeah.
So if you had not put, I guess, any of your promotions or anything updated on LinkedIn, that role wouldn't have come up in your suggestions.
Yeah, exactly. And I think had I not put in my experience there that I was doing operations already, yeah, you're right, it probably would not have popped up. So
And
lucky.
when you applied for that new role, did you change anything particularly with your CV? Did you fully rewrite it? How did you, I guess, stand out from the rest with your application?
Yeah, so I think looking back to my CV, the first thing that I had done was really refine it just so that it demonstrated a really, really clear picture of what I had done in the last year and a half in my role at the previous company. So that was a combination of customer success and operations and working with people and communication and stakeholder management and even sales. So being able to highlight all of that in a 2-page CV was important. And then so yeah, that was pretty much all I did. I didn't do a huge revamp to my CV. I tried to keep my CV quite up to date as my career progressed, but I just wanted to make sure, like I remember looking at the job description side by side with my CV, thinking, okay, what are the things that they're looking for? So putting myself in the picture in the eyes of the recruiter, really. So if I'm the hiring manager and I have this person that I need to hire, what are the things in the CV that I'm going to be looking for? And I just try to, by putting myself in their shoes, think of the things that I should be including. So yeah, tried to follow that. And I received a call for an initial screening where, I basically just spoke through my experience and we went from there.
Yeah, very smart and a great way to do it. That's what we do as either internal talent or recruiters. We have a brief from the hiring manager. They then give us a job description and go, look, these are the duties and responsibilities that they're going to be doing. This is the kind of candidate that they want. We then look at somebody's CV and go, okay, if they need X, Y, and Z, is it demonstrated on their CV? And if you see somebody who's got all the same functions, you're like, yes, I found them. So
Yeah,
the fact
exactly.
that you took the time to do that, that's great. I guess it's harder when you've either been made redundant or just quit a job and you're applying for like 10 or 15 roles. It take a long time to change your CV 10 or 15 times. But in your position where you're being very, I guess, well, not picky, just that was the right one that came along. That was an amazing thing to do, and it worked really well, clearly. And so you've been there now since May 2023?
Yeah, so just
So
tick
just
over a
about a
year.
year. And you've just been promoted. So how did that come about? Did you put things in place with your manager beforehand saying, hey, look, I've come in at here, but this is where I want to be? Or was it because it's a startup, was it a similar situation again where they go, look, you've been doing an amazing job, we're now going to promote you?
Yeah, so it was a combination of both of those things, actually. So When I had started at Heidi, where I am now, I started off in an associate level role. And because I was the second person in the operations team, things had progressed quite quickly. We were building systems, trying to create some sort of order out of the chaos. So I think it was a mixture of proving what I was capable of early on, and just really applying myself to be able to learn and gain as much experience and learn as much as I possibly could. But in combination with that was the really great support and growth structures that were put around us at Heidi from early on. And I had several conversations with my manager, who's our co-founder, who had said, look, we see you here, like you're really good at this. Where do you want to get to at Heidi? And I said, I really want to lead. This is the position that I want to get to. How do we get me there? And it was a combination of me really leaning into those things that I knew I could do well, honing into those things that I wanted to really fine-tune my abilities on. And a combination of that with the support from my managers and also the company growing at the pace that it was, I was at a position earlier this year where we had taken quite a big strategic pivot as a company at the start of the year to go all in on the product of Heidi as we know it now, the scribing tool. And from there, I was basically building up our fundamentals of customer success, operations, onboarding processes from the ground up. So, and then, a couple of months ago, the conversation was had of, a promotion in recognition of what I had been able to do, which I was, very fortunate to be able to be given those opportunities at Heidi from so early on. Continuing to work towards the next milestones and building up scalable systems that are accommodating the thousands of users and deals that we're bringing on.
It sounds like you have a really amazing culture. The fact that you could have those open conversations with the co-founder and say, look, this is where I want to be. And they're like, yeah, cool. This is what we got to do to get you there. I mean, I guess it's very good to have that type of culture, and not every company has that. So, I mean, that's amazing. The one final question that I have is, you're going because you were head of operations, correct, at the role beforehand. Was it a step down, the role that you were going into an associate?
Yeah. So it was a little bit of a step down if you kind of look at the hierarchy of it all. So I had come from leading a team at my previous job to then being an individual contributor. And then I think a couple of months into when I started at Heidi, I then started managing a couple of people. But even though technically speaking, if you look at it, I didn't feel like a step down to me, because it was a fresh new environment. I knew I was going to love what I was doing. And also being an early member of the operations team, which had just been established when I joined, I was able to craft things from scratch and define a lot of the infrastructures that we even have in place now. So in a sense, it didn't feel like I was just a task doer. And I remember starting my role at Heidi very much thinking about that I didn't want to just be a task doer. I wanted to prove that I was capable of more than what was set out in the job description or what was defined as an associate. So that was really important to me from day dot, and I think that's what's helped me get to where I've been able to get to today. Yeah,
great. And you sort of answered one of my questions that I was going to ask of, how did you make that decision? But you answered it there with your answer, which is great. Now, you touched on one thing as well, which was, you wanted to go in and prove that you weren't just a task doer. And that's the sort of thing that we've touched on before, is sort of call it swimming outside of, your lane, which is you've got your core fundamental role that you're doing, but then you're going above and beyond to do the roles requirements that you want to jump into. Now, for people going, okay, that all sounds well and good, I'd love to do that. How much of the day do you think you spent doing your actual job to compare to doing the other little bits to get to where you were?
Yeah, for sure. So it's actually difficult to put a number on it, because when you're in a startup and there's not a lot of structure and you don't have all the processes that you might have at a larger organization, you're wearing multiple hats and you're just doing everything. So that's a common saying in startups, really, wearing multiple hats. And that's exactly what it was. So I think there wasn't kind of a line in the sand for me where I said, I'll do this and then I'll do that. I remember my general mentality at Heidi was, I was one of the youngest people in the company. And I remember having conversations with my manager about this, that I did not want my age to be a ceiling to what I could do. So I think just luckily for me and the Heidi team had always been so receptive to that, and they never ever viewed my age as a limitation and a ceiling. So I was able to really think about, okay, cool. So how are people in the company operating? For me to prove that I am worthy of being promoted, what is my manager's role? What can I be doing to work like my manager? So for me, and even things that I coach into my own team now, when we talk about growth of my own team members, is what can you be doing to prove that you can do more than the set of tasks on your job descriptions? The biggest thing is being proactive. So if there is a problem that you see, call it out and say, okay, I've noticed this system inefficiency. This is what I think we can do to solve it before it becomes a bigger problem. Taking initiative, and it's those little behavioral things, I think, for me, rather than the on paper stuff of all the systems that you've built. So a lot of it is really behavioral, like I said, of being proactive, pinpointing problems, being really good at execution, and just knowing prioritization, time management, all of those little things I think helped along the way.
Yeah, amazing. And I love how you touched on that, where you're like, look, challenge it if there is something that you see that's wrong. But then I love how you added, but have a solution.
Yeah.
We're not telling you to go out there and just point out all these faults in some business processes. Make sure you have a solution. Otherwise, you're just going to be more of an annoyance, if anything.
Yeah. And I think sometimes that's easier said than done. But in general, especially what I tell people even to this day is, it's okay if you don't have the correct answer for everything. If there is a problem, it's so important, or you see that a problem is on the horizon, it's so important that you call it out and don't feel that if your solution is not perfectly curated, that it's the end of the world. There's this saying in startups, fail fast, move on. And I definitely think that's what a lot of what we live by today. So even being able to say, hey, I think there's an issue here. This is how I think we can fix it. This is my proposal to try it out. What do you think? That is so great, because it shows that you're taking initiative, you're being on the lookout for the problem, and you're actually thinking systematically about what we can do to resolve that and prevent it from happening again.
Yeah, perfect. And I've done it in the past where I've gone, look, I don't think this is the best process. However, I don't have a solution, but could we brainstorm about it and bounce ideas? Like I found that was the best way to say, I don't like something, I don't have a solution, but hey, let's work together to try and fix it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's so important as well. And, not being afraid and creating, it's so important to create that psychologically safe environment where people can come to you and say, hey, this is a problem. I don't have a solution. Let's work through it together. And often that is the catalyst for a really great idea being born out of it.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, well, look, Christie, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been amazing getting to know your career journey. We'll hop over to the interviewer insights now and get a look behind the curtain on how you go about interviewing.
Perfect. Thanks, Sam.